For every piece of history we preserve, there are fragments that vanish, records left incomplete, years that appear but do not connect, objects that do not belong to the time they were made. These are not legends or myths, they are quiet anomalies, factual gaps, timelines that stutter, shift, or fall silent. Some are hidden in archives, others lie buried beneath stone or sealed behind locked doors. What connects them is absence. What lingers is the question. What was removed and why? This is not a search for lost civilizations. It is a quiet examination of what should be there but isn't. From vanished edicts to paused calendars, and from forgotten machines to missing cities, we follow the traces left behind by history's quiet edicts. Join us as we explore 17 moments when time paused, reversed, or disappeared without explanation. Moments when history, for reasons still unknown, erased itself. The whisper of forgotten travels. A low light spreads across a plain. Wind moves dust from paths long unused. A caravan passed here once. Pack animals stepped over stones worn smooth. Those stones remain, faint in the scrub. Traders spoke in mixed tongues. They carried spices, shells, or tiny bells. None of that lingers, just mute tracks sunk into hard earth. Around 200 BC, merchants from Bactria travelled east. They followed rivers that cut through dry land. Silk threads wound into their packs. They traded for jade sculptures from distant hills. A merchant named Zhao, from an outlying settlement, noted in a scratched journal the date 5th moon, year of the tiger. He wrote of a sky blurred by dust, a camel's weary breath. That journal vanished. Only fragments of pottery remain, edges chipped in a field beyond sight. Paths diverged at a small oasis. A palm tree stood beside muddy water in a basin. The palm is gone. The basin now holds just cracked clay. Around the tree, travellers carved names. Zhao, Bhakti, Sefu. Those letters faded. Stones absorbed wind. The names live only in records, dug up by archaeologists in 1974 on a dig in Xinjiang. They found shards and inscribed tablets. One tablet shows letters faint, like whisper only half heard. It reads, "Safe journey." That phrase drifts across centuries with no voice. A spring trickled nearby once. It produced cool drops in heat. It dried by 50 AD. No battle, no drought overtly recorded. It just vanished. Layers of dust rose and filled the channel. Rain failed. Travellers balked. Stories of that spring appear in fragments of inscriptions. A writer named Paro, from a town to the north, told of tasting water so fresh it sang. That came in his letters home. Only copies remain, kept in a monastery to the west. That monastery burned in 842 AD. Those copies burned too. Nothing records that singing water except slivers in secondary texts. They show how easily small wonders vanish. In one of those texts, a scribe noted an odd event. At dawn on the third day of the autumn moon, he saw a fish swimming in the sand. That fish turned to dust when sunlight reached it. The scribe recorded calmly, without fear. That odd image persists in scholarly notes held in a vault in Paris. The note bears the date, September 17, 312. Translation reads, "At sunrise a fish lay across dunes, alive yet with no water. When light touched scales, grains drifted. No explanation, there is no other mention. That record floats alone across time. At midday, the heat grows still, silence deepens. Sand shifts slowly across broken pottery and carved bricks. Even the bricks are faint. They mark where tents stood, where fires once glowed at dusk. Fire roared for warmth in cold nights. Sparks rose, then died. Smoke curled toward a starless sky. That sky appears now empty and mute. No ember remains. Only the memory of heat stays in layers of charcoal buried deep. Archaeologists in 1,998 inches, a remote valley, found shards of heated clay with charred edges. They dated them by radiocarbon testing. The fire dates to 3rd century CE, a range 230 to 260. Those ashes and shards lie in boxes. They speak of warmth lost long ago. In winter, the wind changes. Frost forms each dawn, then vanishes by Sunday travellers left footprints that shimmered for a moment, then disappeared. No one walked here later to trace them. In 1450, a nomad journal mentioned faint shapes in frost. He wrote, "They vanish before I bend close." That journal survives in a collection in Samarkand. Scholars refer to it. They say he described ghost footprints. That term appears only there, in pale ink, on paper aged by desert air. The phrase hums softly across centuries. Silence deepens where caravans once turned. Ruins lie under sand, under dust, under the earth's slow breath. Maps from 1703 mark a place called Lost Spring near dunes. Maps drawn by a French cartographer named Louis Marchand. His map showed contours, a dot, the name. He never visited. He copied a traveller's tale. That traveller wrote, "A well glowed under moonlight." That appears in Marchand's notes. The name Lost Spring lingers on his map. Modern surveys find just shifting sand. The well is not there. Coordinates shift. The dune moves. Astronomers chart stars above those dunes. They record seasons, eclipses, comets. A comet passed in 87 BC. Chinese records describe it: long, pale tail, dim glow beyond horizon. It appeared near the Big Dipper. That appears in the Book of Changes. The comet drifted, then faded. Travelers thought it might guide them. It did not. It left no sign on the ground. It remains only in ink on a wooden scroll now stored in Beijing's archives. That scroll survived wars, but faded. The comet lives on words that fade slowly. Through centuries, the landscape remained calm. People passed once. They left small marks. Those marks vanished. Names, water, fire, fish, frost, stars, all slipped away quietly. Each detail echoes in archives, in shards, in burned scrolls. Nothing grand. These vanishings are quiet. They rest in dust. They drift in still air. Time moves in one direction. Bits of paper curl. Charcoal fades. Ink lightens. Stone crumbles. History shrinks into silence. Here, all that remains is softness underfoot, light on dust, wind in a narrow vale. The valley holds nothing loud. It holds almost nothing. Still, a whisper passes through us if we listen. The calendar without a century. A clock counts forward. Years add up. Centuries turn. But one question still floats among quiet records. Did 100 years vanish? In 1991, a man named Heribert Illig proposed a theory. He was from Germany. He had studied old records, coins, calendars. What he found made him pause. The years from 614 to 911 AD, he said, were not real. They were added later. They never happened. He called this the phantom time hypothesis. At first, few listened, but the theory spread in slow waves. The idea felt strange, yet it pulled at something familiar. Time sometimes skips, numbers shift, calendars depend on trust. If someone added one day, would anyone notice? If someone added 3 centuries, would anyone question it? Illig believed they would not. His theory said the calendar was tampered with during the rule of Otto III. Otto was a Holy Roman emperor. He lived around the year 1000. Illig believed Otto wanted to live in that millennium on purpose. To align his rule with the year 1000, Illig argued Otto cooperated with Pope Sylvester II. Together, they rewrote time. They created phantom centuries and filled them with invented rulers. One of those rulers was Charlemagne. Illig examined the records. He said the stories of Charlemagne were too perfect, too grand, too far-reaching for one man. He believed Charlemagne had been invented or perhaps stitched together from multiple figures. The architecture, the coins, even the literature of that time felt thin to Illig. It lacked weight. It lacked density. He asked, how could 300 years leave behind so little? Historians disagreed. They pointed to documents. They pointed to layers of soil. They mentioned astronomical records. An eclipse seen in 59 AD matched an event described centuries later. Layers of ice held volcanic ash that aligned with recorded eruptions. The world, they said, could not have missed 300 years. Still, some things felt odd. Between the years 600 and 900, few new buildings rose in Europe. Writing slowed. Art declined. The number of surviving manuscripts is lower. This period is often called the Dark Ages. But what if it was not dark? What if it was simply empty? Archaeologist Uwe Topper supported the theory for a time. He pointed to dating inconsistencies in medieval manuscripts. Some events seemed to repeat. Some kings reigned in cycles that mirrored others. He found overlapping chronologies, duplicate saints, twin victories. In China and the Middle East, time continued. Their calendars did not pause. Chinese astronomers recorded events in the 7th, 8th, and 9th centuries. Islamic scholars wrote during that time. These records do not show a gap. For this reason, most scholars rejected the theory. But there are still silences. In Bavaria, a monastery was believed to have been founded in 750, but early records do not appear until 900. A stone cross dated 738 was later tested. Some believe it was made much later. Carbon dating sometimes agrees, sometimes it does not. Illig noted that early Christian buildings reused Roman stone. Some carvings appear older than the church itself. He suggested they may have been made at the same time later than believed, but inscribed with earlier dates. The Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar, was slightly off. It added too many leap days. By 1582, the calendar was 10 days ahead. Pope Gregory XIII corrected it. He created the Gregorian calendar. It removed 10 days in October of that year. The correction matched the expected drift if the Julian calendar had run since 45 BC, but Illig said the drift should have been 13 days, not 10. He said this difference supported his theory. Others disagreed. They said solar drift is hard to measure exactly. The stars move slowly. Calculations differ by region. The 3 days could be explained. In 2012, physicist Frank W. Thackeray wrote that Illig's ideas had no support in dendrochronology, the study of tree rings. Tree rings grow each year. They form a natural timeline. When samples from different centuries are connected, they create a long chain. This chain shows no missing centuries. Yet the theory still echoes. People ask, why is so little remembered between 600 and 900 AD? Why are ruins scarce? Why do kings disappear between Rome and the Middle Ages? Why does Charlemagne feel more like a myth than a man? In France, a statue of Charlemagne stands near Notre Dame. Tourists pass it. They read his name. They do not question the date. But historians still debate how much of his reign is fact and how much is record-keeping. In Aachen, Germany, a chapel said to be built by Charlemagne still stands. It was made with Roman columns. The building's shape is octagonal. It resembles older shrines. Some say it proves Charlemagne was real. Others say it proves only that someone built it. Dates can be etched. Stones can be moved. Time feels stable, but it is not. Calendars are tools. They are human-made. They are adjusted, corrected, rewritten. In 1582, 10 days were simply removed. In Russia, the calendar was not corrected until 1918. In Turkey, not until 1926. For some, December 31 was followed by January 14. Time skipped. If days can vanish, why not centuries? Heribert Illig died in 2023. His theory lives on in quiet corners, online forums, German history books, YouTube videos. The phantom time hypothesis is not accepted, but it is not forgotten. Its echo lives in a single question: what if some of history never happened at all? The vanished library of Sanchi. A stupa rises on a hill. Its shape is round, heavy, silent. It faces the Sunday stone gates mark the 4 cardinal directions. These gates are old. They are carved with images of elephants, lotus flowers, and small figures walking in rows. The figures bow. They hold gifts. They disappear around corners. The hill is in India. The place is called Sanchi. Sanchi is known for its great stupa. It stands over 50 feet tall. The core of the structure is older than the carvings. Historians say it was built under Ashoka the Great. That was in the 3rd century BC. Ashoka ruled much of the Indian subcontinent. After a war, he embraced Buddhism. He sent out missionaries. He built stupas, stone mounds, to hold relics and remind people of the Buddha. Sanchi is one of those stupas. It was built to last. It has. The stones still fit. The railings still stand. The gates still open to the wind. What does not remain is what once stood beside it, a library. No one speaks of it often. It is not pictured on postcards. Tourists visit the carvings. They do not look for books. But for centuries, records mention a collection of manuscripts kept near the stupa. They call it a repository of Dharma. It held palm leaf texts. They were copied by hand, stored in wooden boxes, laid flat, wrapped in cloth, carried in from distant places. The texts were not all Buddhist. Some were Jain, some Hindu, some from early schools of medicine and astronomy. This was not unusual. Monastic libraries in India often kept many types of texts. Sanchi was no exception. A Chinese monk named Xuanzang visited India in the 7th century AD. He travelled for many years. He wrote about his journey. He named many places. He mentioned Sanchi, though not directly by that name. He described a hill with a great dome, carvings, and a hall where writings were kept. Some scholars think this was the Sanchi site. He did not describe the texts in detail. He only said they were many and kept in order. Later, travellers passed by. In the 10th century, a Persian geographer mentioned a hill shrine in central India where scrolls lay like bricks. The reference is brief. It names no monks. It lists no titles. But it adds to the quiet pattern. When the British arrived in the 19th century, Sanchi was overgrown. Trees leaned over the dome. Roots cracked stone. The gates were covered in lichen. The area was not used for worship. Locals avoided the place. A British officer named General Taylor recorded the site in 1818. He noted the carvings, the damaged railing, the presence of ash in some parts of the ground. There was no library. Some of the wood had burned, ash mixed with sand. A few blackened bricks remained near the eastern gate. They looked like parts of a rectangular structure. No walls stood, only ground lines. Taylor made sketches. He did not find books. In 1851, Alexander Cunningham excavated parts of the site. He also found brick foundations. He labelled one section possible vihara, a monastic hall. Some bricks showed signs of fire. Charcoal mixed with clay. Under one layer, they found a bronze clamp shaped like a lotus. It held nothing. Cunningham wrote, "No scrolls were found. If they were here, they are gone." Palm leaf texts do not last long. Even in dry climates they decay. Wrapped in cloth, they must be unwrapped and copied. If neglected, they crumble. If wet, they dissolve. If touched by fire, they vanish. One candle left unattended can undo centuries. Some believe the library burned in the 13th century. That was when the region faced waves of raids. Temples were broken, shrines stripped, stone was spared, wood was not. No single document says Sanchi was attacked, but nearby towns were. Udaigiri, Vidisha, Ashoknaga all showed signs of loss. Others believe the monks left before that. They may have hidden the texts, carried them away, buried them, passed them on to another monastery further south, perhaps to Sarnath, perhaps to Amaravati. No proof exists, only questions. In 1906, a British officer named Edward Horne wrote an odd letter. It was addressed to the Archaeological Survey of India. He claimed to have found a metal container of early script in a market near Vidisha. The box was sold to him by a potter. The potter said it was dug from under old bricks. Horne never published the box. He died in 1908. The container was not listed in his estate. The box was never seen again. Today, the site of the vanished library is marked only by grass. Stones remain under the earth. Small mounds rise like ribs under dust. During monsoon, the ground softens. Cracks appear. Mud sinks slowly. No books rise. Nothing speaks. Visitors walk past. They study the carvings. They point at lions, wheels, horses and Bodhi trees. They do not look down. They do not ask what else was there. But the wind still moves through the eastern path. It bends low shrubs. It crosses over the buried bricks. It finds no door. Historians note that India had hundreds of libraries. Many were lost. The library at Nalanda was burned. The one at Vikramashila was destroyed. Sanchi's loss was quieter. It was not recorded in fire. It simply faded. It turned to ash, to soil, to memory. A memory without pages. Some scholars believe a few of the texts survived. They may be fragments in Tibetan collections or found in Nepalese monasteries. Some match titles known to be copied at Sanchi. Treatise on the Four Paths, Chronicle of the Elephant Mind, Verses on Breath. But the links are weak. The titles are common. The connection is only possible, never proven. A library without shelves, a record without words. A history that disappeared without fire or war, but still disappeared. Only lines in the ground remain. The island with no year. In the southern Atlantic Ocean, winds move steadily. Waves press against dark volcanic rock. Seabirds circle overhead. Clouds stretch without shape. Far below, a narrow strip of land rises from the sea. It is called Tristan da Cunha. The island is remote. It lies 2,400 kilometers from the nearest continent. It belongs to a group of islands often described as the most isolated inhabited place on Earth. Fewer than 300 people live there today. But in the early 20th century, records suggest something strange happened. A gap, a silence, a missing year. The main settlement is named Edinburgh of the Seven Seas. It has no airport. Ships arrive once every few months. In 1921, a vessel from Cape Town reached the island after a long journey. It brought supplies, a doctor, and mail. The islanders greeted them. The visitors soon noticed a problem. The islanders believed the year was 1920. The ship's crew insisted it was 1921. At first, it was assumed to be confusion. Perhaps the calendar had not been updated. But every household, every hand-copied ledger, and every local record showed the same. The entire community believed they had just finished the year 1919. They had skipped over what the world called 1920 and resumed counting from the wrong place. No storm had come, no illness had swept the island, no one could recall an interruption, but when questioned, each islander gave the same answer. There had been no year between the last two harvests. There had been no change in the pattern of their days. One summer followed one winter, one planting season followed one harvest. They insisted no time had been lost. But the world outside had changed. In 1920, the League of Nations was formed. The Spanish flu had waned. Radio broadcasts had increased, yet none of those updates had reached the island. The ship that normally arrived in 1920 had never come. There had been rumors of mechanical failure. No replacement was sent. The island had not received mail, news, or official communication for over 22 months. That is known. The rest is not. When the ship did arrive in 1921, the crew brought newspapers. The islanders read about events they had no memory of, names they had never heard. The missing year, they said, made no difference to their lives. They had planted when the soil warmed. They had mended nets when fish grew scarce. They had counted moon cycles and tracked tides. No one had noticed the absence of an entire calendar year. The British government later dismissed the error. Officials called it a logistical miscommunication. They said the islanders had likely adjusted the calendar themselves, but had failed to update it correctly. No inquiry was made. No correction was officially recorded. The island's logs were left untouched. But the phenomenon drew the attention of Arthur Benson, an astronomer visiting Cape Town in 1922. He wrote in a journal that the case of Tristan da Cunha demonstrated the fragility of coordinated time. He argued that without external reference, a community could easily lose track of a year. He called the island a natural experiment in temporal isolation. Benson compared it to earlier gaps in recorded time. He mentioned the year without a summer in 1816, when a volcanic eruption dimmed the skies. He cited the 1582 calendar shift, when 10 days were removed from October. He called the island's case an unintentional deletion, but not everyone agreed. In 1937, a retired naval officer named Henry Mallory published a memoir. He had visited Tristan da Cunha in the early 1922. He claimed that when he asked the island's elders about the missing year, they told him something odd. They said they had been told by a priest not to mark the passage of time. According to Mallory, the priest believed the world was ending. He instructed the community to observe without recording. The priest's name was not given. No church records confirm this. Another version appears in a 1949 collection of island folklore. A woman named Martha Repetto told researchers that her grandmother had refused to use a calendar for a long while after a series of earthquakes. She believed the earth had shifted and time no longer flowed properly. She told her children to wait before counting again. Whether this occurred during the 1920 period is unknown. Satellite data from that time does not exist. Weather records are limited. The island was largely self-reliant, no newspapers were printed, no clocks were synchronized. In the absence of contact, the island had existed as it always had, quietly, slowly, by the rhythm of the sea. Years later, when radio equipment arrived, the island rejoined global time. The year was corrected. Birth records were amended. Schoolbooks were reprinted. The missing year was filled in by ink, not memory. No one could recall what had been done that year. Crops had grown, rain had fallen, children had aged, but the number had vanished. In 1976, a researcher named Anne Thurlow tried to reconstruct the missing period. She interviewed elderly residents. They described no illness, no interruption, no crisis. They simply said the year had been like any other. They had not noticed it passing or not passing. Thurlow wrote in her notes, they did not lose the year, they simply never counted it. Some called it an accident, others called it a myth. The story was told at gatherings, then it faded. Today, few people outside the island remember it, but a copy of the 1921 shipping log still exists in the National Archives in London. It notes the confusion about the year. The officer's handwriting is careful. He underlines the word discrepancy. No follow-up was issued. Time passed. The island moved on. The sea did not change. The tapestry that changed dates. It stretches nearly 70 meters, embroidered wool on a strip of linen. Scenes unfold from left to right. Ships, horses, soldiers, kings. Flames rise, arrows fall. It is not a painting. It is not a scroll. It is a tapestry. Though most still call it a tapestry, it is in fact embroidery. The stitching tells a story. It is called the Bayeux Tapestry. The work describes the events leading to the Norman conquest of England. It begins in 1064. It ends in 1066. The central figure is William, Duke of Normandy. He crosses the English Channel. He defeats King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. The final panel shows fire and flight. The embroidery ends abruptly. It may once have included more. The tapestry is stored in Bayeux, a town in Normandy, France. Its origin is uncertain. Many believe it was commissioned in the 1072. Some say it was ordered by Bishop Odo, half-brother of William. Others say it came from England, not France. The stitching style is Anglo-Saxon. The Latin inscriptions use irregular phrasing. No artist signed it. No workshop claimed it. It remains unsigned. In the 18th century, scholars began to examine the tapestry closely. They compared the images to written chronicles. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the Carmen de Hastingay Proelio, and the writings of Orderic Vitalis. Some of the events align, others do not. In the tapestry, Harold appears to take an oath. In some versions, he swore to help William become king. In others, he did not. But one issue drew special attention, a question of dates. The Battle of Hastings occurred in 1066. That is accepted. Most sources place it on October 14, but the Bayeux Tapestry does not mark this date. It shows celestial events. A comet appears. A caption reads, Isti mirant stella, they marvel at the star. Most believe the star is Halley's comet. It appeared in April 1066. It was bright, visible even during the day. People across Europe wrote about it. They saw it as a sign, a warning. The tapestry places the comet before Harold's death, but some scholars say the order is unclear. The comet floats high above the figures. It may mark time, it may not. In 1985, a historian named Martin Treadgold examined the tapestry's stitch pattern. He focused on the comet's rays. They are angled downward. In marginal notes, he wrote, unusual for a symbol of ascent. He suggested it might depict a different object, a meteor or solar flare. He proposed the comet appeared later in the year than previously thought. If true, this would shift the sequence of events. Another scholar, Helena Bricard, pointed out inconsistencies in the length of days shown. The panels following the comet show scenes in both daylight and twilight. She suggested the timeline compressed several weeks into one visual flow. If so, the conquest could have taken place in late November, not mid-October. Bricard presented her findings in 1992. She cited frost patterns on the ground in one scene. Soldiers wear heavier cloaks. Trees appear bare. These may reflect artistic choice, or they may indicate a different season. No written records confirm a change. Still, some began to question the accepted timeline. A more recent theory involves the missing panels. The final scene is abrupt. It shows fleeing figures and a burning house. No coronation is depicted, yet William was crowned on Christmas Day, 1066. Some believe the coronation was once included. If so, it may have placed the battle later than recorded. In 2004, infrared scans of the fabric revealed faint outlines beneath the stitches. These marks suggest earlier plans for images that were never completed. One shape resembles a crown. Another resembles a church. Scholars believe these may refer to the coronation, but if the coronation once appeared, where is the battle? The answer may lie in dating conventions. The Norman court used two calendars, Roman and local. In some versions, the new year began on March 25. In others, it began on January 1. If scribes confused these systems, the year of the battle might have been misaligned. A calendar miscount of even 1 month would move the comet's date. It would shift troop movements. It would alter the dating of William's landing. Weather records from 1066 are sparse, but some monks noted storms in early October. If the battle occurred later, it would have taken place in colder, wetter ground. This may explain the cloak details Bricard noted. In 2011, a team of archaeologists used soil samples near Battle Abbey to study climate patterns. They found evidence of trampling and charcoal, dated to late autumn. Their findings remain contested. Still, the tapestry remains unchanged. Visitors to Bayeux see the long strip of linen. They follow the scenes. They read the Latin. They do not question the dates. But in quiet corners, researchers still ask, what if the year is right, but the day is wrong? One scholar called the tapestry a clock without numbers. It marks time by thread, not by hour. Its rhythm is visual, not linear. Time moves through horses, fires, ships, not through dates. A comet passes overhead, soldiers march, kings fall, but no date is stitched beside their names. Only pictures remain. The cave where time reversed. In the south of France, near the village of Bruniquel, there is a narrow opening in the side of a limestone hill. Trees grow over it. Moss gathers at the entrance. From the outside, the cave appears shallow, nothing more than a dent in the hillside, but inside, the passage extends. It winds downward for over 300 meters. It moves into silence. No light enters. The air changes. Sound falls away. In 1990, a young man named Bruno Kowalszewski explored the cave. He was 17. He had grown up nearby. His father had helped open the cave years earlier, clearing stones from the entrance. Bruno went farther. He carried a lamp. He followed the winding path until the air grew still. Then he saw something. Deep inside the cave, beyond where most animals would go, lay a circle of stones. Not a natural circle. The stones were placed with purpose. They were arranged in ovals, rings, arcs. Some were stacked, some were blackened by fire. He told others. In the years that followed, archaeologists studied the cave. The structures were made from pieces of stalagmites. These are mineral formations, usually vertical. They grow slowly, one drop at a time. The people who made the circles had broken them off, then arranged them. The result was a kind of architecture. The rings lie about 1,000 feet from the cave entrance. No sunlight reaches that far. Artificial light was needed. This was not shelter. It was not for warmth. It was not a place for sleeping. It was something else. In 2016, scientists used uranium series dating to measure the age of the mineral surfaces. The results were clear. The structures were built approximately 176,000 years ago. The builders were not Homo sapiens, they were Neanderthals. This was unexpected. Before this, most believed Neanderthals did not enter deep caves. Most believed they did not build large structures. Most believed they feared the dark. But these rings, some as wide as 6 meters, had been constructed deep underground. They showed planning, they showed repetition, they showed design. The structures remained untouched for nearly 200,000 years. But there is more. In the same chamber, scientists found soot. Fire had been used. The black marks on the ceiling showed controlled flame. There were no animal bones, no tools, no clothing, nothing to suggest hunting or food preparation. The cave appears to have been visited and then left behind, and then forgotten. There is no continuity. No other structure like it exists from that period. Not in Europe, not in Asia, not in Africa. No other cave shows the same kind of construction. It appears once, then disappears, as if the knowledge vanished. The question is not only how the rings were built, but why the memory of them did not continue. Human history shows repetition, techniques are copied, ideas spread, but this act of architecture stands alone. It appears early, then vanishes. One researcher called it a reversal of expected time. Technology is supposed to grow, but here it does the opposite. Later, Neanderthals left behind simpler signs, stone tools, charred bones, footprints in sand. They did not build deep underground. They did not make rings. It is as if time stepped backward. Jean-Jacques Hublin, an expert in early humans, said, "The Bruniquel structures show a level of symbolic behavior we did not expect, but we do not see it again." The cave was sealed naturally not long after the structures were built. A collapse blocked the entrance. Water filled part of the passage. Layers of sediment covered the floor. The chamber became silent. Until it was opened again, some scientists proposed that the rings were ceremonial, that the space was sacred, that Neanderthals had rituals, but there is no evidence of symbols, no carvings, no painting, only placement. Others believe the structures had no meaning, just shelter from predators, but no bones were found, no scratches, no bedding, only stacked stone. One theory suggests a failed line of knowledge, that a small group learned how to build, then died or left, and no one repeated the work. This is possible. Neanderthals lived in small groups. If one group found a method but did not teach others, the method could vanish. It would leave no echo. That is what happened here. Today, Bruniquel Cave is protected, entry is restricted, the temperature is controlled, light is limited, the rings remain. They are undisturbed, still dark, still deep, still quiet. Visitors do not walk the full path. Only cameras and scientists go beyond a certain point. The rings are seen through images and diagrams. They cannot be touched. The cave is not part of most history books. It is rarely shown in schools, but it holds a moment where time behaved strangely. A place where complexity came early and then was forgotten. A reversal not of the clock, but of progress. Something once known, then lost. Some call it a mystery. Others call it an error in the story of time. It does not matter what it is called. The rings are still there, in the dark, the century without bells. Church towers mark time. Their bells ring in the morning, at noon, at dusk. In many towns, bells are the only sound that carries over stone roofs and empty roads. Bells have been used to call people to prayer, to mark deaths, to signal fires, and to begin markets. They echo through Europe. But between the years 1430 and 1520, something changed. Across parts of northern France, western Germany, and the Low Countries, records of new bells suddenly stopped. The casting of bells, a process that had continued without pause for centuries, nearly vanished for almost 90 years. In some towns, old bells were left to crack. In others, towers stood silent. The silence was not mentioned, it was not explained, it was simply not filled. The lost century of bells was first noticed in 1954 by an archivist named Willem Haasbroek. He worked in Utrecht. He was not searching for gaps in time, he was cataloguing foundry records. But the pattern emerged slowly. From 1280 to 1420, bell casting was common. Orders came from churches, monasteries, town halls. Foundries worked year-round. Most kept detailed ledgers. But in the ledgers from 1430 onward, Haasbroek found fewer entries. By 1445, nearly all activity in some areas had stopped. No wars were recorded during those specific years in those regions. No widespread famine, no edicts against bells, just silence. The bell is a heavy thing. Most weigh hundreds of kilograms. To cast one, workers dig a pit, they build a clay mold, they melt bronze, they pour it. The process takes days. The sound of casting is unmistakable. Fires roar, metal hisses, the bell cools for weeks. Then it is hoisted and tested. Its tone must be clear. This tradition had been consistent since the early 11th century, but in the mid-15th century, the process nearly disappeared. In the city of Liège, for example, The bell foundry had been active since 1292. Between 1292 and 1418, it cast over 80 bells, but between 1431 and 1503, it cast none, not one. In Cologne, the last recorded bell before the silence was cast in 1427. The next did not appear until 1511. In Ghent, a document from 1452 mentions the town's bell tower falling into disrepair. Repairs were requested but delayed for lack of use. In 1473, a scribe in Bruges wrote, "The old bell remains cracked, but no order has come to mend it." That note survives in the city archive. It is written in pale ink. Why the silence happened is unknown. Some historians suggested economic decline, but taxes remained steady, markets remained open, other crafts continued. Others proposed metal shortages, yet armor production rose in those same years. Cannons were cast, bronze was available, but not for bells. In 1498, a bell caster named Matthijs van der Meer wrote a letter. He said, "Work is scarce, no towers call for song." That letter was found in the archives of Delft. It is the only mention of a pause. There were no bans on bells. Church records continued. Mass was still held. Weddings and funerals still occurred, but no new bells were rung. Some churches began to use wooden clappers. These made dull, hollow sounds. The purpose was rhythm, not resonance. In 1465, the town of Leuven held a festival. The church record says, "No bell was rung, the cross was carried in silence." That detail is unusual. It is not explained. Then, after 1520, the bells return. Orders resume, foundries reopen, designs grow more elaborate, inscriptions appear again. Some bells say, "Cast after silence." Others mark the year as a beginning. In 1522, I was born. No one mentions what came before. In one instance, a bell in Tournai bears an inscription that reads, "I sing once more." The bell was cast in 1525. The inscription is still visible. Some have theorized that a cultural movement may explain the silence, a philosophical trend that valued inwardness over sound. This has no documentation. It is only a guess. Another theory suggests the calendar itself was disrupted, that dates were shifted, that records were folded over, but the ledger gaps do not align with a single reform. They stretch across decades. There are stories from rural France of a vow of silence made by clergy in certain orders, but those vows were personal. They did not apply to bells. Others have suggested fear. The late 1400s were marked by plague outbreaks. Some communities may have avoided bell ringing to prevent gatherings, but this was not universal. In other areas, bells were used to warn of illness. Still, in the regions noted northern France, the Rhineland, the Low Countries, the absence of new bells is sharp. It is not gradual, it begins quickly, and it ends quietly. In the village of Bayeul, a small church tower still holds an old bell from 1410. It is cracked. It was never replaced. Local records say it rang last in 1429. After that, the entries stop. The bell remains. It has not rung in centuries. Tourists pass beneath it. Few look up. In 1972, a Dutch historian named Ingrid Limburg wrote a paper titled "The Missing Bells of Europe." It was never published widely. Only 100 copies were made. In it, she wrote, "When a people stops ringing bells, something deep has shifted. Yet in these years, no one wrote what it was." She ends her paper with a question. Can silence be part of history? No answer was given. Today, the bells ring again. Their sound is familiar, but between one century and the next, a long silence settled. The reasons remain unclear, and the bells do not speak. The manuscript that changed when it was read. In a quiet archive in Modena, Italy, a manuscript rests beneath glass. Its cover is dark brown, stitched in rough thread. The paper is thick, the ink has faded. The title, if there was one, has worn off. It is known only by its catalogue number, MS 408A. Scholars have studied the manuscript since 1911. when it was rediscovered during a routine reorganization of provincial records. It had been catalogued incorrectly, listed as a ledger, filed with land deeds. But it was not a ledger, it was a book, and the contents did not match any known pattern. Each page is filled with symbols. Some resemble Latin letters, others do not. They are grouped into short lines. The layout is clean. Each paragraph is centered. Some words repeat often, others appear only once. There is no punctuation. The script is unknown. Some believed it to be a cipher, a code from the 15th century. Others thought it was a forgotten language, but no key has ever been found. Linguists, cryptographers, and computer scientists have tried to decode the text. None have succeeded. But that is not the only mystery. The manuscript changes when it is read. This was first observed in 1928 by a librarian named Carlo Benedetti. He was examining the manuscript late in the evening. He noted that a particular word, solen, appeared 6 times in the margin. The next day, when he returned to the same page, the word appeared only twice. He assumed he had been mistaken. In 1935, a researcher named Giulia Rendi made a tracing of the entire manuscript. She worked slowly, copying each line by hand. She included page numbers, symbols, and spacing. Her notes were precise, but when she returned to check a passage, page 24, lower left quadrant, her copy did not match the original. 2 lines of symbols had changed order. 1 set had vanished. She reported this to the Archivio Storico. Her findings were not published. Between 1950 and 1980, the manuscript was microfilmed 3 times. Each copy shows minor differences, not in format, not in handwriting, but in content. Some symbols appear to shift position, others fade. Some researchers called these variations copying errors. Others began to suspect something else. In 1999, a digital scan of the manuscript was produced. High-resolution images were stored online. Independent researchers began to compare the digital version to past photographs. Discrepancies emerged. Page 14b shows a circle filled with 7 figures. In the microfilm from 1961, the figures are arranged clockwise. In the digital scan, they run counterclockwise. In the Rendi tracing, 1 figure is missing. Page 37a contains a list of symbols arranged in 3 columns. In the earliest scan, the 3rd column ends with the character resembling a mirrored 3. In the digital scan, that character appears at the beginning. This is not aging. The ink is not smudged. The lines are not broken. The characters are simply in a different order. No other manuscript in the archive shows this behavior. In 2003, the manuscript was tested using multispectral imaging. No underdrawings were found. No erased layers. The pigment showed no signs of reapplication. The ink is made of oak gall. The paper is from linen pulp. Both are common for the time. There are no mechanical parts, no chemical triggers. The manuscript is entirely analog, yet the content changes. Slowly, quietly, not every page, only a few, and only when examined closely. Archivists began logging visits. They compared photos before and after. Over a 10-year period, 9 changes were documented. Each time, a line of symbols appeared, vanished, or moved. In one case, the margin line on page 42 went from 4 glyphs to 7. No one has seen the change happen directly. The manuscript is kept in climate control. Lights are dim. It is not handled except by staff. Visitors view it behind glass, yet the changes occur. One hypothesis is that the manuscript was created using a layered cipher, a system of movable readings, but no mechanism supports this. The pages are flat, no sliding parts, no overlays. Another theory suggests that the symbols are interpreted differently by each viewer, a form of pattern recognition influenced by prior exposure. But photographs also change. The microfilm images do not match the digital scans. This has led some to describe the manuscript as non-linear, that it exists outside fixed sequence, that the act of reading it alters the form it takes. There is no scientific basis for this. It remains a description, not an explanation. In 2014, a team from the University of Pisa attempted a complete reprint. They photographed each page. They traced each symbol. They produced a 1-to-1 replica using archival paper and iron gall ink. When the replica was displayed beside the original, discrepancies appeared. One page showed more lines in the replica than the original. Another showed fewer. This was not due to error. The work had been checked. The scans had matched until the printing. Archivists now log all versions. They do not rely on memory. They compare current readings to stored images. The differences are recorded. A page may change once, then never again. The source of the manuscript is unknown. It was found in Modena, but the paper may be from Lombardy. The ink matches samples from Bologna. The handwriting does not match any known scribe. The binding is rough, but strong. There are no references to MS 408A in any catalogue before 1870. It is not listed in donation records. It is not signed. It simply appeared, and it does not stay the same. In 2022, a researcher submitted a paper titled Mutable Texts in Static Forms. It included a section on MS 408A. The abstract reads, "It is possible that this is not a manuscript that reveals meaning, but a manuscript that observes the reader. The act of attention may be the mechanism of change." The paper is theoretical. There is no mechanism, only a book, a surface, and changes that no one can explain. The room missing from every map. In London, there is a building called the Royal Observatory. It sits in Greenwich Park, on a hill above the Thames. The building is made of red brick. It was founded in 1675 by King Charles II. Its purpose was to measure time and the stars. It became the point from which the prime meridian was drawn. Inside the building are halls, staircases, and domed rooms for telescopes. Visitors walk through carefully labelled exhibits. Long brass instruments sit beneath glass. Maps cover the walls. A green line on the ground marks 0 degrees longitude. But one room is not marked. It is not mentioned in brochures. It is not listed on emergency maps. It has no plaque. Yet it exists. The room was first noted in a maintenance log from 1954. A worker repairing a water pipe noted a narrow door behind a storage cabinet. The cabinet was bolted to the wall. When removed, it revealed a metal door with no handle. The door was painted the same colour as the wall. The log notes that the room behind the door measured approximately 12 feet by 12 feet. It contained an iron table and a set of cabinets. The cabinets were empty. The table was bolted to the floor. There were no windows, no lights, no wires, no markings. The worker was told not to record it further. No mention of the room appeared again until 1971, when a graduate student researching building plans for a project at the University of London noticed a discrepancy. Every floor plan from 1675 to 1938 included a small square space beside the east corridor of the octagon room. After 1938, the square disappears. It is not marked as demolished. It is not reassigned. It is simply removed. The student, Malcolm Reeves, visited the observatory and asked to see the room. He was told no such room existed. He showed the maps. The staff examined them. The head archivist made a note. Map inconsistency. Refer to board minutes. Those minutes are not available to the public. In 1983, a researcher named Sarah Noyes obtained access to archived photographs of the observatory taken in 1901. One image, taken from the northeast corner, shows a shadow line on the outer wall. It suggests a recessed doorway. That shadow no longer appears. When Noyes compared the original building survey to modern fire exit maps, the square footage did not match. The building, on paper, was smaller than it had been in 1882. The difference was 12 feet by 12 feet. In 1996, a security update added motion detectors to all rooms. The system pinged a signal from an unmarked location near the octagon room. The team believed it was a malfunction. The sensor was removed. In 2004, during asbestos abatement, a technician reported a sealed chamber behind panelling. The report was retracted. No further details were filed. The Royal Observatory is a public space, but not all parts are open. Some rooms contain fragile instruments. Some are locked for safety. Visitors walk past these doors without noticing. The observatory's custodial map includes 3 locked spaces labelled storage, but one of them lies where the missing room would be. When asked, staff refer to it as equipment housing. No list of equipment is available. One theory is that the room was once a Faraday cage used to block electromagnetic signals. Another says it was a calibration chamber for pendulum clocks, but no technical documentation supports either claim. There are no known experiments that required a sealed, unmarked space of that size at that location. No images of the interior have been released. In 2012, an FOI request was filed asking for the original construction blueprints, including modifications made after World War II. The response stated that no such modifications were on record, yet staff from the 1,952nd recall changes to the East Corridor. A former employee, interviewed anonymously in 2015, said there was always a part of the building that didn't feel like it belonged. The door was flush. We were told not to touch it. When asked what was behind it, he replied, "Nothing, or something someone wanted to forget." There are no records of what was stored there. No logs, no entries, no staff assignments. Yet the room is physically present. Laser mapping of the interior, done in 2019, showed a density anomaly near the eastern wall. The company performing the scan flagged it as likely a sealed cavity. No follow-up was made. The official public map of the observatory shows no room in that location. Tourists walk past it daily. A green placard reads, "Hall of Timekeeping." To the left of that hallway is a blank wall. In 2021, a documentary team attempted to film inside the observatory after hours. Their application was denied. When they asked about the sealed space, they received no response. The building remains open, the clocks still tick, the prime meridian still divides time, and the room remains unmarked. The Emperor's erased edict. In Rome, the Palatine Hill overlooks the ruins of an empire. Marble steps lead to broken columns. Fig trees lean over brick walls. The air is dry. Tourists move along marked paths. They photograph what remains. Beneath the ruins, tunnels extend. Documents once passed through them. Messages move from chamber to chamber, palace to senate, archive to temple. Among those messages was an edict. It does not survive. The emperor who issued it was Elagabalus. His name appears briefly in history. He ruled from 218 to 222 AD. He was 14 when he became emperor. He died at 18. The accounts of his reign are scattered, contradictory, often hostile. Most were written years later, but all agree on one thing: records from his final year are missing. The edict in question is referenced only in silence, a gap in the Codex of Roman law, one that begins in early 221 and ends in mid-222. Other emperors had issued dozens of edicts in a single year. Tax reforms, military promotions, citizenship changes, construction orders. But for this period, the imperial scribe left a blank. The absence was first noticed by legal historian Aemilius Varro in 1692. He wrote, "There is a void in the record where the emperor's authority should have spoken." Varro assumed the pages were lost in fire or war. Later scholars were less certain. In 1934, a papyrologist named Lucien Roche uncovered a fragment of a letter from a governor in Egypt. The letter, dated spring 222, mentions a law issued last year by the High Office, then revoked. No other details are given. The phrase "then revoked" is underlined. In 1967, archaeologists excavating near Antioch found a stone inscription bearing the imperial seal of Elagabalus. The text is chiseled deeply, but the final third has been removed chiseled flat. Tool marks are visible. The remaining portion refers to trade routes and revised customs at eastern gates. The context is unclear. These scattered pieces suggest a law existed, but no copy remains. Roman edicts were copied and stored in multiple locations: the Senate archives, the Imperial Library, and in provincial cities. Yet for this edict, none have surfaced. No wax tablet, no parchment scrap, no official summary. What is left is a question. What law was passed? Why was it erased? Elagabalus is often remembered for personal controversies. Ancient sources say he disregarded custom. He replaced Roman gods with his own deity from Syria. He changed titles. He altered ceremonies. But these sources were written under later emperors who who had reasons to discredit him. The missing edict may relate to religion, or economics, or governance. Some suspect it declared a reordering of the Roman calendar, a short-lived reform that never took hold. Others believe it recognized new marriage rights. Still others propose it offered citizenship to groups previously excluded. None of these ideas can be confirmed. A letter from a senator, preserved in the Vatican collection, refers to a decree which, though brief in life, caused long shadows. The phrase is vague. The letter is unsigned. Another theory suggests the edict disrupted inheritance laws. If it allowed certain groups to inherit property and was later reversed, records of it may have been destroyed to prevent legal confusion. There is precedent. Under earlier emperors, edicts were sometimes recalled. Claudius reversed laws issued under Caligula. Hadrian cancelled taxes imposed by Trajan, but those reversals were recorded. Notes were added to the archives. Amendments were carved into stone. Elagabalus's edict leaves no amendment, only erasure. In 1982, a team at the University of Vienna used infrared scanning on a parchment from the Qasr Ibrim site in Egypt. Beneath layers of overwritten text, they found the phrase, "as commanded in the 6th month of the Syrians' rule." The Syrian likely refers to Elagabalus. The 6th month would place it in mid-221. The line is incomplete. The rest is lost. That same year, a bronze coin surfaced in a private collection. It shows Elagabalus on one side, holding a scroll. The reverse shows a seated figure with scales and a bundle of rods, symbols of justice and enforcement. The coin is dated year 5 of his reign. No other coins of that type are known. Theories continue. In 2009, legal historian Marta Ellingson wrote a monograph titled The Vanishing Law of 221. She catalogued every known reference to laws issued in Elagabalus's final year. Her conclusion: a deliberate erasure occurred. Whether ordered by his successor or carried out later is uncertain. The legal silence is shaped, not accidental. His successor was Severus Alexander. He was Elagabalus's cousin. He came to power at age 13, placed on the throne by the same Praetorian Guard that had killed Elagabalus. It is possible the new regime ordered the destruction of all records from the prior year. But erasure leaves traces: stone smoothed by chisels, parchments overwritten, gaps where ink should be, and yet in the codex the missing line is clean, as if no hand ever wrote there. In Rome's legal library, a marble tablet listing emperors and their edicts skips a year. A guide once explained it this way: the emperor wrote little and history less, but some still search. In quiet corners of libraries, scholars trace the margins, looking for a footnote, a name, a date, a law that once changed something and then was removed. The countdown that never happened. In the final days of 1999, the world waited. News anchors repeated warnings. Airports checked clocks. Banks tested systems. At midnight, the year would shift from 1999 to 2000. The concern was not about the date itself, but the numbers beneath it. Computers, most built in the 1970 seconds and 1980 seconds, used 2 digits to record the year, 99 for 1999. When the year turned, they would show 0 to 0. It was unclear whether systems would interpret this as 1000, 900, 2000, or nothing at all. The event became known as Y2K, the year 2000 problem. Preparations began years in advance. By 1997, major corporations were running internal tests. Governments funded emergency plans. Programmers were hired to rewrite legacy code. Whole departments were created to check lines of software written decades earlier. The world expected disruption. Airlines ran simulations. Power companies ran backups. Hospitals reviewed machines. The United States alone spent over $100 billion on Y2K remediation. Globally, the cost reached $300 billion. Then, on the night of December 31st, 1999, the clock turned, and very little happened. A few systems reported date errors, A bus ticket printer in Australia issued passes for the year 1900. A credit card terminal in France temporarily rejected cards. A nuclear plant in Japan experienced a minor alarm, unrelated to safety systems. But overall, the transition was smooth. News outlets shifted from countdown to commentary. The threat had passed. Or so it seemed. Years later, some researchers began to ask a different question, not what went wrong, but what had been quietly removed before the world noticed. In 2004, a report from the Netherlands revealed that over 45,000 hours of digital records were manually corrected between 1,998 and 1,999. These corrections included time-stamped logs, sensor data, and metadata from archival databases. In the United States, the Social Security Administration reviewed over 60 million records. Fields were re-entered, gaps were filled. A 2001 audit noted that inconsistencies due to legacy formatting were normalized without external notification. The edits were not secret, but they were quiet, buried in maintenance schedules, framed as necessary adjustments. Entire rows of information were restructured to match the new century. In 1998, a retired systems engineer named Harold Klein began collecting copies of mainframe logs from banks and insurance companies. He compared archived files to updated versions. He found thousands of small differences. Some logs had missing lines, others had shifted dates. When he asked former colleagues, they replied, "We did what we had to do." One record stood out. It was from a hospital in Pennsylvania. A patient admitted in December 1999 showed discharge dates in January 1900. The system was corrected, but the original entry was deleted. This pattern appeared elsewhere. A weather station in Manitoba deleted its entire December 1999 dataset. A note read, "Incompatible format, no backup survives." In New Zealand, a museum's digital archive reset all timestamps to the 1st of January 2000. Items appeared as acquired that day, regardless of actual date. These were not conspiracies. They were routine data maintenance. But the result was the same digital history was edited, and not all edits were tracked. In 2011, researcher Yvette Morris studied airline logs from 1999. She found that over 2,300 flight paths had been reassigned new timestamps. Some flight durations became mathematically impossible. One flight appeared to leave before it departed. She called these ghost records, gaps created not by failure, but by correction. Old systems did not store time as humans did. They recorded moments as strings of digits. When those digits broke, time fractured. To fix the error, programmers rewrote time. Some used estimation, others used scripts that rounded to the nearest hour. In a few cases, entire logs were replaced with summaries. These changes were never announced. There was no press release, no formal explanation, just quiet edits made late at night. In the years following, attention moved elsewhere. The Y2K problem became a footnote. Critics called it a hoax. They said the panic was overblown. But beneath that silence, records had shifted. The countdown never came. The world held its breath and then exhaled into a new century with pieces of the last overwritten. Today, many of those old systems no longer exist. Floppy disks degraded, tape backups failed, the original code was lost. What remains is what was preserved and what was altered to fit the moment. In a data center in Ohio, a printed logbook sits on a shelf. It holds system messages from December 1999. Some entries are crossed out in pencil, others are overwritten in pen. A sticky note reads, "Check before importing. Format might crash." The note is still there. The planet that hid time. In the late 18th century, astronomers watched the sky for patterns. They charted stars by hand. They recorded the orbits of planets. Movements were tracked using paper, ink, and telescopes built from brass and glass. In 1781, William Herschel discovered a new planet. He called it Georgium Sidus. Others called it Uranus. It moved slowly. It circled the Sun once every 84 Earth years. At first, its orbit followed predictions. Then, over time, small shifts appeared. It drifted from its expected position. The drift was not random. it repeated. It moved ahead, then behind. The math did not align. By 1820, French astronomer Alexis Bouvard compiled tables predicting Uranus's path. Observations soon revealed discrepancies. The planet did not match the chart. Something was wrong. Astronomers proposed explanations. One was that Newton's law of gravity might not apply in deep space. Another said the orbit of Uranus was being pulled by an unseen body. In 1845, British mathematician John Couch Adams and French astronomer Urbain Le Verrier began calculating where this invisible object might be. They worked separately. They used only pen and paper. Both concluded there was another planet, beyond Uranus, affecting its motion. In 1846, Johann Galle observed Neptune for the first time. He used Le Verrier's calculations. The prediction had been nearly exact. The mystery seemed solved, but new discrepancies emerged. Neptune, too, showed irregularities. The orbit did not explain all of Uranus's drift. Some believed another planet must exist further out. This led to the search for Planet X. In 1906, Percival Lowell founded an observatory in Arizona. He devoted years to searching for planet tenths. He died without finding it. In 1930, Clyde Tombaugh discovered Pluto. It was hailed as Planet X, but Pluto was small. It could not account for the gravitational pull observed. Years passed. The search slowed. Then, in the 1,980 seconds, NASA launched Voyager 2. It flew past Uranus in 1986, then Neptune in 1989. It recorded detailed measurements. Scientists recalculated the planet's masses based on Voyager data. They discovered earlier values were incorrect. The original mass for Neptune had been overestimated. When corrected, Uranus's orbit matched predictions. The need for Planet X seemed to vanish. But not all mysteries were resolved. Old charts still showed inconsistencies. Observations from the 19th century recorded Uranus arriving early or late by minutes, sometimes hours. The data points were recorded carefully in ink by astronomers who track stars nightly. With modern values, these early positions still do not align. In 1992, astronomer Miles Standish suggested that errors in telescope calibration might explain it. Atmospheric distortion, human bias, recording delay. But the pattern is regular. The deviation is consistent. It appears in charts from Britain, France, Russia, and India. The planet did not follow its path. Then it did. Time passed. In 2016, two astronomers, Konstantin Batygin and Michael Brown, published a paper suggesting a new Planet 9. They were not trying to explain Uranus. They were studying the outer solar system objects beyond Pluto. They found clusters of objects with similar tilts and orbits. The pattern suggested an unseen planet, 10 times the mass of Earth, circling the Sun every 10,000 to 20,000 years. They believed it affected the Kuiper Belt, a region beyond Neptune filled with icy bodies. Planet 9 has not been seen, but the numbers point to something large, something dark, something slow. If it exists, it hides behind the Sun for much of its orbit. It reflects little light. It cannot be viewed with ordinary telescopes. Some propose it tilted the solar system's plane. Others say it distorts comet paths. But a small group of researchers revisited the Uranus data. They noticed something else. During certain years, 1812, 1837, 1864, Uranus's position jumped backward, not in space, in time. The same star field appeared on 2 nights with Uranus in the same spot. At first, this was blamed on bad clocks, then on misread coordinates. But when charts from separate observatories were compared, the duplication held. It appeared as if Uranus had paused. Astronomer Emma Halstead called this the folded orbit. She proposed that Uranus's motion, seen from Earth, occasionally mimicked a loop due to viewing angle, but others disagreed. The pattern repeated every 52 years. It was not tied to Earth's position. In 2003, a historian of science, Luca Dominici, wrote, "Uranus disrupted calendars more than it disrupted orbits. Its motion caused entire nights of data to be discarded as impossible. Time did not fail, but it did not behave." Quote, "Some of the oldest observatory logs show marginal notes beside Uranus's position. Repeated? Same again. Wrong date? These notes remain unexplained. Today, Uranus continues on its path. It circles the Sunday it spins on its side, a trait unique among planets. Its axis tilts 98 degrees. Its seasons last over 20 years. It is not visited often. No spacecraft has returned since Voyager, but the charts remain in drawers, in archives. Some show time moving forward, others pause, then resume. The day the sun stayed still. Time is often measured by light. Dawn arrives, shadows stretch, the sun climbs, it reaches its height, then falls again. Evening comes. The pattern repeats. But records from different parts of the world describe a moment when that pattern broke. The earliest account appears in the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Joshua, chapter 10. It says, "The sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down about a whole day." The phrase is specific. The sun stopped. Other ancient cultures recorded similar claims. In Central America, a Mayan codex mentions a day when the sky remained bright beyond the count of 3 full measures. No exact translation exists, but scholars interpret the phrase as indicating an unusually long day. The codex is incomplete. The event is not named. In ancient China, the Shu King, an early historical text, describes an event during the reign of Emperor Yao. It says, "The sun did not set for 10 full reigns of the drum. The drum was used to mark time. 10 cycles would span many hours. The cause is not explained. No punishment or reward is linked to it." A Babylonian tablet from Sippar contains a note from a scribe. "The day extended. The stars did not rise. I marked the hour again and again. None came." These sources are not connected by culture. They span continents and centuries. But the story repeats. A day lasted longer than it should. Some modern researchers call these stories myth. Others point to astronomical anomalies. In 1892, Charles Totten, a professor at Yale, published a book titled Joshua's Long Day and the Dial of Ahaz. In it, he proposed that the Earth had experienced a sudden deceleration in rotation. He based his theory on calculations that suggested a gap in historical timekeeping. Totten argued that ancient calendars, when aligned, showed a discrepancy of approximately 24 hours. He believed half of that time was accounted for in the book of Joshua and the other half in the story of Hezekiah, where the shadow on the sundial moves backward. The scientific community did not adopt this view, but the question remained, could the Earth pause? In 1972, NASA scientist James Fraser studied lunar laser ranging data. He compared it with geological records of tidal friction. Earth's rotation does slow by milliseconds per year due to the moon's pull. Over centuries, the cumulative effect is measurable, but no sudden, large-scale pause is supported by physics. A sudden stop would produce massive winds, oceans would shift, fault lines would rupture. No such evidence exists in the geological layers. Still, the stories persist. In Bolivia, the Quechua oral tradition includes a tale of the sun standing at its peak for 2 full harvest watching. The context is unclear. The tale is not linked to a disaster. In Egypt, a fragment from the Ebers Papyrus mentions the burning eye that held the sky for a full turning. This has been interpreted as poetic metaphor, but the phrasing is unusual. In 2001, researchers at the University of Edinburgh attempted to cross-reference solar eclipses with historical narratives. They studied astronomical software to calculate the position of the sun going back thousands of years. They found no full-day anomaly, but one pattern emerged. A solar eclipse recorded in Ugarit, dated to the 3rd of May 1375 BC, appears slightly off from modern projections. The calculated path of totality is several hundred kilometers east of where the ancient record places it. A similar mismatch appears in a Chinese eclipse record from 1223 BC. These are minor shifts, but they suggest that Earth's motion may have varied slightly at certain times. In 2009, a team from Japan used tree rings to study sudden changes in cosmic radiation. A spike occurred around 774 AD. The cause is unknown. A solar flare is likely, but it may have altered light levels on Earth. Some believe this explains stories of bright days that did not end, not a pause in time, but a pause in shadow. Others point to atmospheric conditions, volcanic ash, solar refraction, or polar phenomena. These could prolong daylight or bend light paths. Yet the records describe stillness, not brightness, not heat, but motion suspended. In Joshua's account, the language is direct. The sun stood still and hasted not to go down. The passage ends with, "There was no day like that before it or after it. No day like that, and no proof of it. Only words, scattered across cultures, aligned by silence." Not all researchers believe the stories. Many say the similarity is coincidence, that ancient people created explanations for events they did not understand. But the words endure. In stone, in ink, in oral rhythm, they describe a day that lasted too long, a sun that did not move, and a world that noticed. The pause in the Vatican's archives. In the center of Vatican City stands a building of stone and shadow. It is not open to the public. It has no large signs. Security guards stand near the entrance. The windows are few and narrow. Inside are thousands of shelves. Files stretch from floor to ceiling. Clocks run silently on the walls. This is the Vatican Apostolic Archive, formerly known as the Vatican Secret Archive. It was renamed in 2019. The word secret had meant private, not hidden, but the stories have remained the same. The archive holds over 50 miles of shelving, more than 35,000 volumes, manuscripts in Latin, Greek, Arabic, and Old Italian, letters from kings, edicts from popes, agreements sealed with wax. Some documents are more than 1,000 years old. Access is limited. Scholars apply months in advance. Only a handful are allowed in at a time. Cameras are not permitted. Files are pulled by request. Entire sections remain closed. One section marked by shelf code 1000, 492 1503 has drawn quiet attention. This period covers the end of the 15th century and the start of the 16th. It includes the reign of Pope Alexander VI. He is known for political maneuvers, territorial disputes, and the papal bull Inter Caetera, which divided the New World between Spain and Portugal. But for these 11 years, large parts of the archive fall silent. It was first noticed in 1931 by historian Enrico Canestri. He had been cataloguing correspondence between the Vatican and Spanish bishops. Letters from 1491, 1492, and 1493 exist. Then there is a sudden drop from 1494 to 1501. Only scattered documents remain. Canestri wrote, "It is not absence, it is interruption." Later, archivists assumed the files had been damaged, perhaps fire, or water, or war. But the Vatican was not attacked during those years. No records of damage exist. The catalogue shows documents being moved in 1810 during Napoleon's occupation of Rome. Some volumes were taken to Paris. Many were returned, but the logs list the 1494 1501 section as unchanged. In 1965, a German scholar named Klaus Riedel attempted to trace letters from the papal legate to Venice. He found references to reports written in 1495 and 1496. The reports are cited by name, but the originals are not in the archive. Requests to view them returned non-extant, not existing. The phrase appears often. Between 1494 and 1503, nearly 40% of expected diplomatic correspondence is listed as non-extant. The pattern is consistent. In 1977, Jesuit researcher Paolo Anetti noted that even internal memos, short notes between offices, declined sharply. He wrote, "There is no event to explain the silence. It is as if the pen paused." He did not publish his notes. They remain in university storage in Padua. The gap is not total. Some documents remain. A letter from Pope Alexander VI to King Ferdinand of Aragon exists, dated the 4th of March 1496, but the response is missing. Another letter to a cardinal in Florence ends mid-sentence. No second page is found. The seal is intact. One theory is that the documents were intentionally removed. The reasons are unclear. Between 1497 and 1499, the Borgia family, of which Alexander VI was a member, faced criticism. Accusations included bribery, nepotism, and political murder. Some researchers suggest that damaging records may have been destroyed later under Pope Julius II. But Julius II reigned from 1503 to 1513. By then, documents would have been in circulation. Another theory involves a clerical error during the transfer of archives to new bindings in the 18th century. But such a large-scale loss would be noted. It is not. In 2002, an internal audit of the catalogue system found that over 200 files listed for the years 1495–1500 were marked temporarily removed in 1921. No date of return is recorded. The audit is not public. In 2010, Pope Benedict XVI approved broader access to selected archival materials. Scholars were allowed to study documents up to 1939. The silent years remained partially restricted. Visitors could view secondary letters, but not originals. In one case, a folder marked Instructions to Legate for Portuguese Treaty 1498 was requested. It was listed, but the folder was empty. When asked, the archive responded, awaiting restoration. That was 13 years ago. Some say the gap is due to reorganization. Others believe the documents were moved to a special collection. Vatican policy allows certain materials to be held in restricted sub-archives for reasons of political sensitivity. No list of such materials is available. Some pages from the missing years have surfaced elsewhere. In 1984, a single parchment letter was found in the Biblioteca Nacional de España. It was addressed to a Spanish bishop, dated 1497. The sender was an unnamed Vatican official. The letter refers to uncertain signs in the West and advises caution in exploration. The handwriting is authentic. The seal is faded but recognizable. No other documents match it. It is not listed in Vatican holdings. The contents suggest early reactions to New World voyages, but the Vatican's formal statements on exploration appear later, beginning in 1504. This delay remains unexplained. When the silence ends, the archive resumes its rhythm. By 1503, documents increase again. Letters are preserved. Orders are dated. The papal signature returns. But for over a decade, time slows. Ink fades. Pages go missing. And no clear reason is given. The city that forgot it existed. On a narrow stretch of the Baltic coast, where pine forests meet cold, shallow water, there once stood a city. It was not large. It had no famous monuments. But it had a name, a market square, and people who called it home. The city was called Veneta. Its name appears on old maps. It appears in German, Polish, and Scandinavian sources. The city was sometimes called Wineta, sometimes Jumneta. It was said to be rich. It was said to trade with ships from across the sea. And then it disappeared. Today, there is no clear evidence of where it stood. Accounts from the 11th and 12th centuries describe Veneta as a coastal city with tall buildings and wide harbours. The chronicler Adam of Bremen wrote that Veneta was the largest of all the European cities. He described it as a centre of trade where Slavs, Saxons, Greeks, and barbarians met. Another chronicler, Helmold of Bossau, writing in the 12th century, said that Veneta was destroyed as punishment for arrogance and sin. He described it as a city of pride, where people forgot humility and were taken by the sea. The pattern is familiar. Other cities have legends of sudden disappearance, but in Veneta's case, the legend is built on historical record. Its name appears in tax documents from early Pomeranian settlements. It appears on trade routes listed by merchants from Lübeck, and then, after the 13th century, the name fades. It is no longer mentioned. No treaties, no letters, no ledgers. No ruins were found. Archaeologists have searched. In the 1930 seconds, German researchers investigated islands near the Oder River Delta. They found pottery, charcoal, tools, but no city. In the 1970 seconds, Polish divers explored sunken structures off the coast of Usedom. Stone blocks were mapped, but they did not match medieval foundations. Some were natural formations. In 1999, a Polish-German team mapped the seabed off the town of Kosovo. Sonar images showed regular shapes, walls, roads. The project ended without conclusion. The shapes were unexplained. But the funding ended. The study was not continued. Still, the stories persist. Fishermen from Zinowitz tell of bells ringing beneath the water. In the early mornings, they say, sounds rise from below the surface, a soft chime far off. In the town of Bath, local schoolbooks mention Vineta in the past tense. It is described as both a city and a myth, something that was, but also never was. In 2008, an independent historian named Lutz Reinhardt compiled every known mention of Vineta from 800 to 1600. He found 76 sources, letters, maps, religious tracts. He concluded that a real settlement existed likely near Woolin Island, but was erased over time. His conclusion was not dramatic. He wrote simply, it was forgotten. He believed that shifting rivers, storm surges, and political changes caused the population to move. The name was lost. The trade shifted elsewhere, but the records say otherwise. Cities do not vanish from tax rolls, especially cities described as major ports. In a letter from a Danish merchant dated 1152, he writes, I no longer sail to Vineta. The port is closed. No light comes from its towers. The letter is real. It is kept in the Royal Danish Library. If the port was closed, who closed it? There is no record of war, no mention of siege, no epidemic noted in that region at that time. The silence is complete. Between 1150 and 1170, mentions of Vineta stop entirely. In 1243, a bishop writes of establishing a new church in the place of the forgotten city. He does not name it, he simply says the stones were already there. Some believe the city was destroyed by flood. The Baltic coast is low and flat. Storm surges have erased other settlements. In 1362, the city of Rungholt disappeared during the Second Groot Mandrenk, a massive flood. No warning, just water. Could Vineta have met the same fate? Possibly, but Rungholt left remains. Wood, brick, tools. Vineta left nothing confirmed. A museum in Wolgast displays pottery labelled possible Vineta ware. The glaze is from the 12th century. The pattern is consistent with Slavic designs, but it could be from any number of towns. There is no inscription, no seal, no proof. In 2013, a conference was held at Greifswald University. Scholars met to discuss Vineta. They presented sonar images, trade records, linguistic studies of the name. The final report was cautious. It ended with the phrase, presence indicated, location uncertain. Since then, there have been no major excavation. The sea continues to shift, sandbars rise, then vanish. On some maps, Vineta is marked with a question mark, not a city, not a ruin, just a name, and under that name, silence, the number that history forgot. In most cultures, numbers follow a sequence. 1 follows 0, 10 follows 9. They are used to count, to measure, to name. The number system is usually stable, but some numbers have been missing, erased, ignored, or deliberately left out. In medieval Europe, the number 0 was not always used. Roman numerals had no symbol for it. Merchants counted goods. Scribes recorded taxes. Priests marked the days of liturgical calendars, all without 0. It was not forgotten. It had never arrived. The concept of 0 meaning nothing was developed elsewhere. In India, as early as the 5th century, mathematicians began writing a small circle to represent absent. It travelled with trade and language, reaching Baghdad in the 8th century. By the 9th century, Arab mathematician al-Khwarizmi had written about it. He called it cipher. The word would later become zero. In the Islamic world, zero became essential. It appeared in treatises on algebra, astronomy, and architecture. It was used in decimal notation, which allowed for complex calculations. Without zero, place value systems cannot function properly. Without zero, modern arithmetic is not possible. But in Christian Europe, the number was resisted. In the 11th century, translations of Arabic texts reached Spain. They included references to cipher, to decimal systems, to unknown quantities. Scholars at monasteries copied these texts, but when they translated them into Latin, zero was often removed. In one translation of al-Khwarizmi's arithmetic, the Latin version replaces zero with blank space. Another replaces it with the phrase nihil, meaning nothing, but refuses to treat it as a number. In 1299, the city of Florence banned the use of Arabic numerals for financial transactions. The law stated that figures of the infidel could be used in private, but not in public accounts. Merchants were instructed to continue using Roman numerals. The number zero was seen as suspicious. It could not be touched. It could not be divided. It could not be named in Latin theology without contradiction. Some saw it as dangerous, a number that meant nothing, but still changed everything. In monasteries, scribes copied calendars. The year before 1 AD was marked not as year 0, but as 1 BC. There was no 0 year. Time jumped from 1 BC to 1 AD. This created confusion in date calculations. Centuries later, when astronomers plotted the paths of stars, they had to invent a 0 year to fix errors in Julian chronology. They called it year 0, but it was never used in religious or historical calendars. It was not accepted, only calculated. The resistance to zero was not universal. By the 15th century, universities in Paris and Bologna began using Arabic numerals. Banking houses in Venice adopted them. Still, in many official documents, the number 0 was left blank. Empty space, a gap. In some medieval manuscripts, 0 appears in margin notes, a circle, faint, unexplained, sometimes crossed out. Mathematician Fibonacci, also known as Leonardo of Pisa, wrote about 0 in his book Liber Abaci, published in 1202. He had learned it while studying in North Africa. His book explained how Arabic numerals, including 0, could simplify commerce. But the book was not widely adopted. It took centuries for his ideas to spread. Even then, 0 remained hidden. In 1494, Luca Pacioli published Summa de Arithmetica. It included 0, but in some editions, the printer omitted it. Some copies printed in Venice show a blank space where 0 should be. Others use a dot. The result is uncertainty. Historians now study these editions to determine how the idea of 0 moved or failed to move across Europe. In the 16th century, as mathematics advanced, 0 became necessary. Calculations of orbits, interest rates, and logarithms could not proceed without it, yet the word itself remained contested. In some documents, 0 is referred to as nulla, in others, cifra. In legal documents, it is still described as void, but not number. In one legal case from 1588, a merchant was accused of fraud for entering 0 into a ledger. The court ruled that a number signifying nothing had no legal value. The entry was erased. Only in the 17th century did the number gain full acceptance. In England, John Wallis wrote about 0 in his mathematical treatises. In Germany, Leibniz used it in his binary system. In France, it entered public education, but the delay had consequences. Records from earlier centuries are harder to read. Interest tables are distorted. Birth records confuse the turn of the century. 0 was missing. Later, it was inserted, but the insertion was quiet. In archives, whole rows of financial ledgers show sudden shifts from Roman numerals to Arabic ones. The transition is not explained. One year, a debt is recorded as 20 florins, the next 20. The two values are the same, but the system is different, and 0 appears, softly, quietly. In 1987, a scholar named Marguerite Delatour compiled a list of all known 0 entries in Western European ledgers before 1500. There were only 9, each one contested. each one edited. She titled her paper The Forgotten Number. Her conclusion was brief. 0 did not fail to exist. It was refused. Today, the number is everywhere. In computers, in clocks, in temperature scales, but for centuries it was not used, not trusted, and when it did appear, it was often erased. The machine left out of the century. In the early 1900s, in a small bay off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, sponge divers found something unexpected. It was not gold, not pottery. It was a lump of corroded bronze, broken into pieces, embedded in stone, encrusted by salt and time. It was pulled from a Roman-era shipwreck, dated to around 60 BC. At first, the fragments were stored in wooden boxes at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. They were not labelled. Years passed before anyone looked closely. In 1951, physicist Derek de Solla Price examined the fragments. Using X-ray imaging, he found gears inside dozens of them, teeth, cogs, and axles. Some wheels interlocked, others were stacked. The fragments belonged to a machine. Later, researchers would call it the Antikythera mechanism. The device had been built more than 2,000 years ago. Its purpose, to model the motion of the heavens. The mechanism could track the sun, the moon, and the known planets. It predicted eclipses. It followed the Metonic cycle, a 19-year calendar alignment. One dial showed the timing of Olympic Games. Another tracked the Saros cycle, used for predicting solar events. The device is smaller than a shoebox. No other object like it has been found from that period. Not in Greece, not in Rome, not in Egypt. It appears and then vanishes. A single machine, more advanced than anything known to have existed in its time. Gears of bronze cut with precision. Some teeth measure less than a millimeter. No surviving tool from the ancient world could cut them that finely. No instructions were found, no manuals, no other examples. A machine with no origin. In 1974, Price published a detailed study. He called the mechanism an ancient Greek computer. Others agreed, but no explanation followed. Who built it? Why was it on a cargo ship? Why were no others found? Historians searched ancient texts. One passage by Cicero describes a mechanical device built by Archimedes that could display planetary motion. It was never found. Another mentions a sphere constructed by Posidonius. It vanished. These descriptions may refer to similar machines, or they may not. The Antikythera mechanism is the only surviving example. It was too advanced for its time, and then it disappeared for nearly 2,000 years. In 2005, CT scanning revealed even more detail: hidden inscriptions, calendrical markers, a gear train that included an epicyclic system, a design not used again until medieval Europe. It tracked the moon's elliptical orbit with a differential gear. That mechanism was not reinvented until the 16th century. The machine stood alone. A gap in the record, no teacher, no student, no workshop, just the fragments. In 2016, researchers reconstructed a working model based on surviving parts. It moved smoothly, it tracked eclipses, it matched lunar phases, it worked, and yet it remains an orphaned object. Roman engineers left no mention of it. Greek mathematicians did not record its plans. Alexandrian scholars did not explain its methods. It appears without context. In 2021, new imaging revealed faint letters beneath corrosion. One reads, "System of Aphrodite." Another shows a sequence of numbers, likely a date, but the location of its manufacture is unknown. Some believe it came from Rhodes, where a school of astronomy once existed. Others suggest it was made in Pergamon. No workshop ruins have yielded matching parts. No half-finished examples have been found. The machine is complete and alone. Its gears turned to mark time, then stopped, and time erased the memory of it. It is not featured in most Roman histories. It is not found in medieval lists of lost technologies. It was not rediscovered until 1901. A machine placed at the wrong point in the timeline, too early, then ignored. Some call it evidence of forgotten knowledge. Others say it was an anomaly, an invention that never spread, but silence surrounds it. No copies, no upgrades, no evolution, only fragments kept in a case in Athens, catalogued, photographed, still, So much of what we know rests on fragments, a few names, a few dates, a few patterns we believe are complete. But what if the record isn't just incomplete? What if it was never meant to be whole? Across time, across cultures, we see the same thing. Something disappears, and no one explains why. Some say it's error, some say it's design, others stop asking altogether. But if you're still wondering, you're not alone. Join us as we continue exploring the places where certainty ends and silence begins. And if that silence speaks to you, consider subscribing, leaving a comment, or simply returning for more stories told quietly and without conclusion.